Hi, my name is Cheryl Paswater. I am the Chief Fermentationist of Contraband Ferments here in Brooklyn, New York. Today we're sort of circling back into a new fermentation project, which is to brew kombucha. Kombucha is one of my first ferments. It's a favorite and it's something that is really easy to make. I think it's a relatively forgiving fermentation process. There's a few things you're going to need to make kombucha. You're going to need some sort of vessel to ferment in. So that could be a glass jar. It might be a ceramic fermentation vessel or crock. You might use a plastic bucket, a food grade bucket. I've fermented in the inside of the ceramic in a crock pot before and just never turned the crock pot on. Ceramic, glass, plastic, so get creative, see what you have around, but you're gonna need some kind of vessel to ferment your kombucha in. So find something to do that in. So that's your first thing, is a vessel. The second thing that you're going to need for fermentation and to do kombucha is some kind of sugar. Now this is just an all-natural cane sugar. You could get organic sugar. Try to stick with a real full sugar. I'm not the biggest fan of making kombuchas using things like coconut sugar or date sugar. It's not quite enough sugar for the fermentation process, so I'm going to encourage you get some good cane sugar, white sugar. You could even do this with brown sugar if you like that molassesy taste, but see what you can get. And then you're gonna need some kind of tea. This could be a loose leaf tea, this could be tea bags, but I'm gonna really encourage you, use a green tea, a black tea, an oolong tea, even white tea, but you need something that can have caffeine in it. Caffeine does a couple things in the fermentation process that are really important, which provides tannins and caffeine. So you're going to need caffeine to keep your culture happy in the fermentation process. You can blend teas. You want to do a mix of, green and white tea, you can totally do that. Use what you have. Don't feel like you have to go out and buy super high-end or fancy teas in order to make kombucha. And then the last thing you are gonna need is a culture. And we're gonna kind of start off our day focusing around this. So the culture in kombucha brewing, I'm gonna pull one out, is called a Scobie, S-C-O-B-Y. And what that means is a symbiotic cultured organism of bacteria and yeast. So this is a Scobie right here. This sort of white, sometimes brown, kind of globulous disc. Some people like to call it a mushroom or a mother, but really what a Scobie is just yeast and bacteria. It's not going to hurt you, but is it necessary to have this in order to make kombucha? So you can't have kombucha without a Scobie. Now this one is rather thick because a couple of them grew together in the fermentation process. I could eat this. It will not harm me. It's bacteria and yeast. In order to get a Scobie, the great thing about them is they multiply. If you've seen the movie Gremlins, and then they feed the gremlins and then they reproduce more gremlins. I think it's gremlins, the little fluffy ball things. Scobies are similar to that of gremlins. They reproduce and they grow. They're an alive being. Once you have those things, you're good to go. You have everything you need to make kombucha. There's a few steps to making kombucha that are really important. We've talked about getting tea. Now this is tea that I have previously heated up because heat is the nemesis of fermentation. Heat kills things. But kombucha and all fermented foods are live, wild foods. They're, microbially, charged. And so heat kills microbes and heat doesn't allow microbes to do their job. And so heat is sort of not our friend, like I mentioned. But what you can do is brew tea. And like in this case, I took tea bags and heated it up. I filled this with water. I heated it up and brought it to a boil. So for a gallon of kombucha, you're going to want to use 4 to 6 tea bags. Alternatively, if you're using loose tea, more might be 2 tablespoons of tea, and you can make it a little satchel, a piece of fabric, or an old t-shirt, or some cheesecloth, and toss it in. In this case, I use some green tea bags. So I'm going to actually squeeze these out because there's good liquid and flavor in these. And what I did was I filled this pot with water And then what I did is I bring it to a boil. Now, I usually boil my tea for about 20 minutes on the stove top, let it rumble, do its thing, and then I like to turn off the heat and just let it chill. Now, sometimes I'll do this before bedtime, and then I'll put like a lid or a little hand towel on this and sit it on the back of my stove and let it sort of cool down overnight. That's one way you could do this. You could let it just sit and hang out during the day. You could put this like in a little ice bath in your sink and try to cool it down. But one thing I like to do is I like to take my hot tea once it's been sitting for a while and it's cooled down, and I'm gonna add sugar. And I want to add my sugar while this liquid is still a little bit warm or hot, because it's going to help to disintegrate the tea. So for a gallon of kombucha, again, you're going to use 4 to 6 tea bags or 2 tablespoons of loose leaf tea that you're going to wrap up in a little satchel. And then you're going to add sugar, which I have not done to this yet. So I'm going to add my sugar. And then you're going to stir this up. Oops, and make sure that it is well diluted, all right? You don't want to feel any sugar granules in the bottom of this. You just want to make sure that, things have kind of melted and, that the sugar isn't caking in the bottom of the pan. And that's one thing to look out for. If you just pulled your kombucha right off of the stove and you add all your sugar, but you neglect to stir it in, it's all going to cake and sort of stick to the bottom of your pan. You're not going to want that. Then you're kind of trying to force to like scrape it off. So, do it while it's hot, do it while it's warm, but make sure you kind of stir this up until it's disintegrated. You're going to let this liquid cool. Now, a good test is you want it to be below body temperature. If I can take my finger and stick this in here and it's not super hot and I'm not getting burned, even if it's a little bit warm, which mine is right now, I know it's not going to kill my kombucha Scobie. So, and that's really my goal. So that's sort of your first step to brewing kombucha. You're going to get your vessel, your jar, whatever you want to put your liquid in. All right, now I've got some kombucha Scobies already in here with a little bit of liquid left over from my previous kombucha batch. Now, if this is your first batch of kombucha, don't worry about having to have some liquid from a previous batch. If you happen to have some kombucha around and you want to do a couple, splashes of liquid in here, you can totally do that. That's just sort of like jump starting a car, giving it a little, kind of zapping it ahead, making it a little bit better. All right. So I'm going to take this and I'm actually going to give myself a little prevention, and I'm actually going to pour all of my liquid in here. All right. Leave a little room at the top of your jar, and then you have your kombucha, you have your Scobie. Now, kombucha is one of the things that's important about the science of kombucha is you're creating an aerobic environment. And in an aerobic environment, it means that air can get to that ferment. And what you're going to sort of notice is over time, this kombucha Scobie, it might sink. I mean, right now there's nothing really on top. It's just sort of a little bit of liquid, and you can kind of see part of a Scobie. So what you want to do is you're actually going to take a piece of fabric, some kind of cloth. I'm not a big fan of cheesecloth for this because I've had fruit flies and things get into my Scobie. And you don't want that. So you want to take some fabric. An old t-shirt works great for this. If you have some fabric sitting around, you don't want a hand towel, but something that has a tight knit weave, and even muslin. So just find something you have, take a little rubber band. If you don't have a rubber band, some tape will work fine. And then you're just going to cover this. So I did not put a lid, I'm just putting some fabric so that air can move in and out of this vessel. All right, and that's what's going to help the kombucha Scobie to grow. All right, so this is what's called our first fermentation process. We've taken tea and sugar, we've taken our kombucha Scobie, we've put it in a jar, covered it with fabric, and now we're just going to let time and microbes take over. A lot of things happen in the fermentation process. There are yeasts in the air. There's yeast in our homes. That's going to help jumpstart the fermentation process. Fermentation is about the right food in the right environment. Sugar being the food, which we've done, and we've put it in a vessel and we've given it airflow. So we've given it the right environment. And if you do those two things, you will almost always be successful in fermentation. Right food, right environment. Put this in a cool, dark place. You're gonna let it hang out and ferment. All right? You're just gonna let it hang out. That's it. A counter, a cabinet, somewhere out of the way. Ideally not in direct sunlight. And then we're just gonna let the microbes take over. Let the bacteria and yeast do their job. Now there's a few things that happen. We've given this the right environment. So now the fermentation process is going to start. And part of that fermentation process is that those kombucha scobies that I showed you, they like to eat sugar. So sometimes people come to me and they're like, oh, Cheryl, I'm really worried about the sugar content in my kombucha, and is this really bad? Or I'm diabetic, or I'm sugar sensitive, whatever it is. And a lot of that sugar is going to be eaten up in the fermentation process. Again, it's the food for the SCOBY, but there is some sugars left behind. If you're somebody who you're super sugar sensitive or caffeine sensitive even, because there is a good amount of caffeine in here. The byproduct of kombucha is, yes, there's some probiotics, but as sort of this fermentation process starts and the energy starts and the microbes start to take over, we're getting probiotics, but we're also getting a lot of acidic acid. And acidic acid is actually in vinegar. What's kind of fantastic is, well, I wouldn't say kombucha has as much probiotics as, let's say, cultured fermented vegetables. It has a lot of acidic acid, and acidic acid is a really great digestive enzyme. It's still great for us. Kombucha is a great alternative to, let's say, sodas. So you're just gonna tuck this aside, let it ferment. But what you're gonna start to notice is over time, and as that energy starts to build, on the top sort of surface of where the liquid is, you're gonna start to notice like there's a little layer of something weird growing. And you're gonna think it's something wrong, but it's not something wrong. That little layer, it might look a little clear, sort of white, cloudy, is actually the new kombucha SCOBY forming. To create an aerobic environment, not anaerobic, an aerobic environment, what you need is air. But kombucha scobies, what they'll do is they like to seal themselves off. So what I said earlier, kombucha scobies like to reproduce. This is them reproducing. That weird little layer that's going to start to grow, that's your new kombucha SCOBY. That's your new gremlin. For a kombucha in this first fermentation process, you might wait 10 to 14 days. But the longer you ferment, the more tangy and sour something is going to get. And also the heat and the weather outside speeds up the fermentation process or can slow down the fermentation process. The warmer outside, the faster it's gonna go. The colder outside or in your apartment, a little bit slower it's gonna go. And so I think the best way to learn about kombucha and how you like it is, let's say it's at day 7. Take your fabric off. Take a little spoon, dip it in there, give it a little taste. Do you like how it tastes? Do you want it to be stronger? Now, the longer it ferments, the more it's gonna actually start to ferment towards vinegar, to the point where if I left my kombucha fermenting for 3-4 months and I just left it like this, I'm gonna get vinegar. I'm gonna get a kombucha vinegar. Let's talk about what happens next, all right? Let's fast forward. It's 14 days from now. You're not, sure. You think you like the flavor of it. What you're gonna do is you have a couple options from here. And your options are to flavor it. You might want a wild berry kombucha, or you might want ginger grapefruit kombucha, or lavender lemonade kombucha. Maybe you wanna do a peach kombucha, or blueberry peach basil kombucha, watermelon mint, whatever flavor combinations you want to come up with. So there's a few things that I like to do when flavoring kombucha. One thing to note is don't use ground up spices. I kind of find that ground up spices become a little chalky and weird in a liquid drink. But whole spices are fair game. So, if you have whole cinnamon sticks that you want to plop in, or some star anise, clove. Maybe you want to use part of like the grapefruit peel and twist it and get a little bit of that bitter essential oil. You can do that. I have some fresh lavender here from the summer, and I'm going to add some lavender into my kombucha today. You could do lemongrass. So think about, again, what do you have that you think is going to be an amazing flavor? Beets, carrots. You can use fresh juice to flavor it, all right? You have a million options. So this is actually a kombucha that's finished, but I'm gonna flavor it. All right, so I'm gonna put this aside. And then this is our new kombucha. Now this has been fermented. You can even see it's a little bit fizzy. Signs that it's alive. You know, that kombucha Scobie had grown on top and I took it out. You're gonna get some bubbles. You know, if you smell it, it's gonna smell sweet or tangy or a little bit sour. That's what you want. You know, if the salivary amylates in your mouth juice up and your mouth starts to get a little like, ooh, that smells good, or I want that, that's your body's natural instinct kind of saying like, hey, I'm okay, enjoy me. You know, one thing I would always tell you is before you flavor this, you know, you wanna make sure that you take a look at the Scobie, make sure you don't see anything growing on it or living in it. You know, having a bubble is sort of natural. Having some brown stuff, that's actually yeast. That's totally normal. But red, black, neon colors, even blue, gray, green molds, you're not going to want to drink that. You're going to want to throw away your entire batch. But take a look at it. I always check my Scobie just to make sure I haven't gotten any like fruit flies or anything in there, because a maggot Scobie is not something that you want to have an experience with. All right, so my first ferment is done here. Now I'm gonna flavor it. Now how I decide to flavor things, you don't need a lot of like fruit or spices to flavor. I sort of go by the amount. So like here I've got a half-gallon jar of kombucha. I'm gonna use sort of some mixed berries. So I'm gonna plop, you know, this is maybe half cup of berries in here, and I'm gonna kind of pop them right into this kombucha. And this is, you know, again, this is sort of like what I had, and you could use frozen fruit, you could use fresh fruit, you can use, you know, dehydrated fruit. You could use dried fruits. You have fruit juice. You have options of what you can use. I kind of like to use fresh or frozen fruit. That's my personal preference, but we're not really people who keep juice around. So lavender. I'm gonna put about a teaspoon. I'm just gonna eyeball it of lavender in here. Again, I just want a little bit of that kind of floral lavender flavor to come through. It can be a strong flavor, so I'm not going to add a ton in it because I don't want the flavor of lavender to kind of outdo my berries, all right? I'm going to actually stir this up a little bit. All right. And then from here, you have an option. I actually like to put a lid on my jar. I don't put the fabric on, I put a lid. It's gonna help a little bit with the carbonation. And I like to tuck this away and let it sit for about 2 days. Put it back on the counter, let it hang out. You know, maybe once a day you sort of jostle it up and help to distribute the flavors. But I like to put a lid on it and just let it hang out for a couple days. All right, and what this is gonna do is it's gonna allow you to flavor your kombucha. You know, another alternative to this would be sometimes people like to use these sort of brush top bottles. These are actually really nice for carbonation if you want to carbonate something. But what I like to do is do this with my fruit, and then I'll let it sit for 2 days, and then I like to add my carbonation, which is what we're going to talk about next. So again, this is your secondary ferment. You're just flavoring it, allowing that flavor to build. Again, taste it. How do you know you like it? You want it to sit for a few more hours? Let it sit for a few more hours. You have that ability to do that. Usually what I do is I scrape my fruit out, throw it in a smoothie, I'll save it, I'll make kombucha popsicles and do part kombucha, part of that leftover fruit, because there's no reason to really waste it. So if you're interested in food waste issues, this is sort of a great option for dealing with food waste and not having to just discard or compost or trash the little bit of leftover fruit that is in here. All right, so your secondary ferments. Now, let's say it's 2 days from now. We're gonna take this one step further. 2 days from now, you like the flavor, but you want a little bit more carbonation and fizz. This is where you have a couple of options of what you can do. You know, again, you could filter out, you know, all the fruit out of here. You know, maybe you have like a little strainer, something like this. You know, I like to take a funnel and maybe put a strainer inside of it. And then that way it catches any liquid. But what you want to do is you want to move this all to some kind of narrow necked jar. Another alternative for this is if you have a leftover 2-liter bottle. You could, you know, use this as a leftover seltzer bottle. But what I could do is take this liquid, you know, put my funnel inside of here, put my strainer, and then take this liquid, pour it into here. So I'm filtering out the fruit, right? And filling up my jug. And then I can leave this sitting for a couple more days, and that'll help it to build up carbonation. And how you know it's carbonated is that when you go to kind of squeeze the bottle, it's going to be rock hard, and that's going to tell you the carbonation is building. This is a really nice solution if you're worried about possibly a glass bottle breaking or that carbonation building up. Carbonation is action, right? And so this is a nice alternative, especially if you're new to fermentation and you can't keep an eye on it. When it's really, really hot in the summer, this is what I like to use. But, you know, again, these garage tops, I also use these often. They're really fantastic. You know, put your liquid in them. Again, I like to let it sit for a couple days, let that carbonation build up. Open your bottles over a sink. In case they do get very active and they overflow, you know that you have room in that sink to do it. You know, and the other thing is, like, leave a little bit of space. Don't fill it up all the way to the top of the jar or the vessel. Always leave a little bit of room in whatever you're fermenting, so that bubbling activity and you know, that live, you know, microbially inhibited liquid or food, if you're fermenting food, will have some space to do its job. All right. And that's how you carbonate. Now, you know, the one thing I will tell you is, you know, it's hard to get kombucha, I find, at home that has the same effervescence that you might get in a commercial kombucha. Oftentimes those kombuchas are being kegged. You know, most of us probably don't have that at home. I have used a soda stream, even though technically it's for water, to add a little extra fizz into kombucha, and it's worked really well for me. But again, usually this works really well. I get some nice fizz, put it in the fridge, I let it carbonate there for a couple days and hang out, and then you're good to go. And then you have homemade kombucha. Pretty simple, hopefully pretty straightforward. You know, if you have questions about this, you're not sure, you can always email us at info@contrabandferments.com. You can Instagram or Facebook message us. I'm always happy to answer questions about your ferments. And, you know, check back with Stony Brook University. They're going to be sending along recipes for you to download and enjoy. And we hope that you stay safe. We're going to be having other workshops coming up during this time, being hosted at our fermentation bunker here in Brooklyn, New York. So you can visit contrabandferments.com/social distancing to check out any workshops. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that you guys have. I hope that you'll take this amazing time that we do have to ferment and make things, cook at home, enjoy some microbes, keep up your immunities, and fermentation is amazing for that. And happy making. Thanks for having me again. Bye.